Here we go.
Alrighty, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of the Credix Insights series. This is my first appearance here, so I'll just take a very quick minute to introduce myself. My name is John. I'm on the Credix team based out of the New York City office, and I'm on the capital markets team, specifically focused on capital formation. So I'm having conversations with asset managers, family offices, credit funds, even some crypto investors and whatnot. And so that's kind of my main responsibility and role here. I am thrilled to have a friend and former colleague, actually, Steve Leahy, on the line with us. Steve and I worked together at Circle before I left to join Credix. And Steve is currently Director of Revenue for Distribution Partners. So I'll give a very quick overview of kind of the agenda that we have set out for the day, and then I'll hand it over to Steve for a little bit more of a formal introduction. But today we've got Steve here, who's an expert at Circle. So we're going to discuss kind of who Circle is, how they got started, what their current and future focus looks like, and a little bit maybe about their mission as well. We're going to dive into USDC, which is Circle's stablecoin, which Steve is going to expand on, hopefully greatly here for everyone in the audience. Its features, the institutional nature of it, and kind of how it's even integrated into the Credix processes. We have a very close partnership and relationship with the folks at Circle that we are very proud of, and it brings a lot of value to our business. So maybe I'll take some time to expand on that as well. So before we kind of dive into the main content, Steve, I'll hand it over to you for a little bit more of a formal introduction.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Very happy to be here. So I'm Steve Leahy, Director here at Circle within the Revenue organization. Like John, I focus on capital markets use cases. I joined Circle in January of 2021. Prior to that, I spent a number of years in traditional asset management, working for a couple of large firms here in the Boston area where I live. I ended up doing a lot of FX derivatives work for me off to grad school, and then built a bunch of platforms and companies in the order routing and risk management space for foreign exchange. I did that for a while. I had my aha moment about distributed ledgers and blockchains at the end of 2016. I happened to sit in on a class at MIT that was called Blockchains for Supply Chains. And again, I literally had my aha moment about why a distributed ledger is better than just a series of MySQL databases that are almost infinitely backed up with one another. But I'm not into supply chains, I'm into capital markets use cases. And so 2017, I switched from the foreign exchange world, got involved in the digital asset space, spent some time working on platforms, was invited to be an early employee of what we would now call a layer one blockchain. We launched it, it was great in the Cosmos ecosystem, but ultimately didn't get any traction. And I was fortunate enough to join Circle here, like I said, at the beginning of January 2021. And again, my role within Circle, working with some of the larger use cases and largest users of stablecoins in general, obviously specifically USDC. That means I work with some of the exchange operators, market makers, and OTC desks that are out there in the world, and really looking to help expand the use cases for USDC, ensure that our product and legal teams are aware of some burgeoning opportunities and use cases, and in general, keep the growth of stablecoins on the rise. And so, yeah, I'll pause there, John.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Steve. I feel like a lot of us have had those certain aha moments. So it's nice and interesting to hear kind of everyone's different perspectives and how they sort of got into this space. So that sounds great. So listen, I obviously know Circle very well. I know my colleagues at Circle at Credix know Circle very well. But I would love for you to maybe cover kind of how did Circle get started? What's sort of the mission at Circle? What do you sort of believe in as a company? And maybe can riff on that for a little bit.
Sure, happy to. So Circle was founded just over 10 years ago. Jeremy Allaire, one of the two co-founders, started Circle in 2013. And Circle's mission from the beginning has been to expand economic prosperity and opportunity via the frictionless movement of value. And digital distributed ledgers are the way to do that. It's very clear. We believe in public blockchains. We believe in finding use cases to make the movement of value frictionless. And so Circle over the years has had a number of different revenue lines. Circle in 2018 launched USDC in partnership with Coinbase. and USDC has really taken off as one of the stable coins. I think it's pretty clear to all those who are in the industry, stable coins are one of the key primitives that will be a basis for the growth of digital assets in the coming decades. And so USDC took off. Circles have expanded greatly ever since the growth of and the launch of USDC. And so now we see USDC being used in all sorts of different use cases, trade finance, global remittances, capital markets use cases, which I think Credix kind of covers all three of those in a way. I like seeing. Payments, and Circle has branched off, and we're not just a stablecoin company. We now have digital dollar infrastructure that's being used by large corporations to add Web3 capabilities to existing networks of communities, whether you're a large consumer-facing brand with 10 million, 20 million, 100 million apps downloaded, and you want to make Web3 available to your existing client base. Circle's got those tools and that infrastructure to truly seamlessly and comprehensively allow for these companies to add Web3 capabilities to their existing platforms that they've got. And so that's really Circle's focus. We've got stablecoins. A little bit more about Circle. We recently got our full MAS license over in Singapore. And so I think you can expect to see continued growth of Circle's products and our team in the Southeast Asia region. And we continue to work on, we've announced that we are applying for AMF license in France as well. And so global,
Wow.
It's proven that stablecoins are this really killer use case or primitive for digital assets. Circle will continue to grow and expand around USDC as a core, but more and more services to truly offer a broad range of digital dollar infrastructure.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very helpful. So I think you mentioned USDC stablecoins kind of like a number of times there. I know we obviously have some sort of sophisticated, maybe more in the weeds individuals on the line here live with us. But for those that are joining us and are very, very new to this ecosystem in this industry, could you maybe take a step back and provide a very high level overview of even what a stablecoin is? Because there may be some people out there that are less familiar, and then maybe dive into USDC and why someone would be using USDC over, say, maybe some other stablecoins that might be out in the market.
Happy to, and I like the way you frame that, John, because I think for those of us who are deep in the digital assets world on a daily basis, there's some kind of assumed level of knowledge, and maybe it's good to kind of set the table here at a little higher level. So a stablecoin is really what it sounds like. It is a natively digital asset that is tied to some underlying real world asset, generally a fiat currency. For us at Circle, we've got USDC, we've also got Eurocoin as well. And so essentially, before I go too deep on that, stablecoins have historically either been tied and backed by actual assets or fiat currency, as Circle is. But also there have been some attempts to create algorithmically stabilized coins. And I'm intrigued by this, and I've seen a number of attempts happen ever since Basis Coin back in 2018 first started. So far, the fiat-backed stablecoins really are the primary, the winners that are creating the use case and being used in this 125 billion or so dollars worth of stablecoins out there in the world. And so for us here at Circle, we believe in permissionless blockchains, and also we believe in trust and transparency. That's what sets USDC apart from a number of the other stablecoins that are out there. And so for Circle, we run our business as transparently as possible. We work with large name, globally recognized financial service firms to help support the value and help us show the transparency of what we do. When clients send us actual dollars and we generate one of our USDC or digital dollars, those funds are then held and managed by partner firms such as Bank of New York Mellon as custodian, BlackRock as an asset manager holding our 90-day or 91-day T-bills. And so really Circle's goal is to have the most liquid and available and transparent backing of our digital dollars on the blockchain. And again, down to get a little bit into the nitty gritty, there's even a ticker symbol for the fund that BlackRock manages for us. That's USDXX. If you go to any of your stock market apps, you can type in USDXX. You can see down to like the actual holdings of what we hold in our reserves. And again, this is part of our trust and transparency. We want our users to understand what Circle's role is and how we are treating our significant obligation of keeping track and ensuring safety of the assets behind our digital dollars. So a little bit more about USDC. Initially launched on Ethereum, USDC is now on 9 different blockchains, and as we announced in a recent post the other day, we'll be adding 6 more blockchains by the end of October or so. And so there's some announcements that are coming out a little bit later today, actually in about an hour and 20 minutes. If you're on social media, pay attention. We'll be announcing some of the blockchains that are coming out next for us and that are being launched. And to us, we believe in a multi-chain future whereby builders and developers, I know Credix focus on Solana, you're able to build and add USDC on any one of the blockchains. And importantly, the interoperability of multiple blockchains, with Circle being the issuer and redeemer of USDC, we're able to work with our partner firms to allow for USDC to be swapped simply, efficiently, quickly between different blockchains. And I'll dig into some of the mechanics of that a little bit later in our conversation here.
Yeah, that's great. It's really awesome to hear. Like, you started with USDC, you kind of, built up this gathering. Obviously the issuance kind of, blew through the roof, and then expanding to Eurocoin as well it's really cool. There are so many use cases, and you're kind of proving it in different markets, and it provides value all over the world. Right. And so that's extremely interesting. And we'll even get a little sneak peek. So stay tuned to Twitter for the announcement in an hour. It's a good little plug there. And I know, for our case, like Credix, we use USDC, right, as a means of settlement. And so it's very, very much built into our core processes and the way that we process transactions and all of that. And so I'll maybe dive into that in a little bit, but it's extremely, extremely valuable to us as well. So all of that makes a lot of sense. Steve, you mentioned BNY Mellon. I know that you guys have a number of very institutional partners and customers that are using USDC, that trust USDC, maybe that hold the actual dollars. And so there's sort of that inherent trust. And you've already said a couple of times how transparency is key to sort of what you're doing at Circle. Maybe would you mind going into a little bit of detail in terms of like, who are your partners and customers? You don't have to name any names specifically, but kind of what's the main target sort of that you're going after? What are the values that you kind of bring to them? And then why is it that they trust USDC so much?
Yeah, perfect. So if you think of it, to us, the true, like, kind of the addressable market is massive. It's almost like the M2 money supply out there. The idea that one can hold and store value via your own bearer asset or your own digital wallet is very appealing. The idea that you should be able to, as Jeremy Allaire has said, move value and transfer value as easily as you can send an email now. That's really the end goal here. And the use cases for that are massive. That is from the small users in developing world countries that maybe need a loan and are looking to a platform like Credix to help them finance a small business that they want to get off the ground. They're looking for, some capital to be brought in, traditional means of bringing capital in. There's too much friction in that. There's too many layers. There's too many middlemen taking a piece. So from that small business user to the individuals who need to pay for a cup of coffee. We love the fact that we're partnering with Solana Pay. I saw some recent posts about Solana Pay's integration with Shopify. I'm super excited about that. But then on the other end of the spectrum, in the world that I come from, most all trading, no matter where it happens around the globe, is often denominated in US dollars. And in this world of digital assets, whereby it's a truly bearer instrument, we have true delivery versus payment capabilities. There's always been a need for a digital dollar that can be used and moved and used for settlement. And there are a number of digital dollars that are out there being used in this manner right now. Some of the partners we work with are the largest trading firms on the planet, whether from the traditional assets world that are moving into crypto, whether some of the crypto native firms. Most all of them make use of USDC for moving value and also storing their digital dollars. When you think about the use cases, especially at the institutional level, the way the exchanges work or DeFi, whether decentralized or centralized, you need to be able to move this value quickly, seamlessly. And so when you've got these digital dollars on hand, you can't afford for the loss of value. These are supposed to be maintained at a truly stable value of 1.0000. And so we see the use cases there again. Kind of the institutional and the trading world was the initial pickup of use cases for USDC. We see that continue to move into the world of trade finance. We see it move into the world of financing and kind of micro loans. Again, Credix focus on that kind of part of the world or part of the industry. And so, broadly speaking, let me go back to your initial question. You mentioned some of the partners. I'm not going to name them all on the use case side, but Circle's done a great job in partnering with the true global institutional financial service firms to help us with our goal of transparency and trust that our digital dollars are what they say they are.
Yeah, that's great. I think something that Circle brings that is very apparent, right? You have a lot of background in traditional finance, and I think a lot of individuals at Circle do. They came from sort of this archaic system where they saw how things were kind of operating. Yes, traditional rails work, but there are pain points. And so how do we kind of move that into the next stage of capital markets and bring that in a fully digital nature? And I think that kind of, bleeds through to this sort of institutional nature that Circle's developing, right? I think it's a perspective that you sort of need to have. And it's fantastic to see that. And I know I mentioned this, obviously we have a great partnership with Circle. We use USDC for all of our transactions. And one of the questions that I personally get, given that I'm speaking with these institutions, these asset managers, these family offices, these credit funds is, okay, well, what is this USDC thing? What is a stable coin? Who is Circle, and why should we even trust them? And I think this transparency that you've covered a couple of times, as well as KYC and AML, right? Something that is kind of so simple and everyone uses in the traditional sort of like ecosystem, but in this kind of future decentralized finance ecosystem, maybe not everyone uses that, right? There are a lot of protocols that don't want to do anything with, KYC or AML or anything like that. And I think that's kind of one of the main reasons that we're able to get our partners comfortable with the USDC side of things is that institutional nature, the KYC, the AML, the money transmitter licenses, the institutional partnerships that you have, around the globe and whatnot.
Yeah, it's definitely our firm belief that for digital assets to truly reach their potential, one does have to play by the rules, and we have to, we onboard customers, we do know your customer, we bought all the licensing where we operate. We're in agreement there that the way to truly reach the potential to, quite frankly, disrupt some of the traditional rails and processes of finance, one does have to be regulated, work with regulators, quite frankly, spend time helping educate those who may be legislators or regulators and have a working relationship with them such that we can help them understand what it is that they are regulating and legislating on.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a great sort of segue into the next point that I wanted to bring up. Obviously, like, how do you guys at Circle think about the regulatory aspect here? How does Circle think about it? I know we're kind of in an ever-changing regulatory landscape, right? And you hear things about stablecoins, kind of regulation that's currently being drafted, or the way that our government, for example, is sort of thinking about that. So, from your perspective, how do you sort of think about that and navigating it, because it's a very tough thing, right?
Yeah. Certainly, we're very fortunate at Circle that we've got incredible leadership from Jeremy Allaire, Elizabeth Carpenter, my boss Kash Razagi, and Dante Disparte, who leads our global policy and strategy teams. They, again, there's this, part of our DNA is to work with regulators. And so Circle takes its time. Circle ensures that we've got buy-in when we talk with regulators and legislators, and understand that to operate, we do need to be as compliant or compliant with all the rules and regulations that affect us. Circle, when I said takes our time, the process to get regulated in Singapore, the process to apply for regulation with AMF in France. That's a time-consuming process. And there are a lot of aspects to our large and growing business that have to be reviewed and potentially changed to ensure that we are in compliance with any other regulatory regime that we choose to be under. And so I think that's Circle's thoughts about this. I do think here in the U.S. it's a slow process, certainly. Though I do feel that we are making progress here in the U.S. I will say from personal opinion, having served on some of my town's finance committees, I realize that when government takes action on anything, whether regulatory or anything, it affects everybody. When a private business takes an action, users can choose to opt in or opt out to that private business. But when the government makes any sort of rules or laws, it affects everybody. And therefore, that's why government moves slowly. That government is supposed to make sure that you are checking and thinking about all the intended and unintended consequences of rules and regulations that may be put forth. Circle understands that. And again, our job is to work closely with regulators and legislators if and as they are asking for opinions, if and where we can help provide knowledge or education to those, whether it's through our Executive Insights blog that you can find on our website, whether it's through some of the public speaking, or even testifying in front of Congress, as both Jeremy Leahy and Dante Disparte have done.
Yeah, and I've watched a number of those sort of, Jeremy up there in front of everyone, and it's interesting. It's like it's a huge educational sort of like almost burden, right? It takes a lot of information to sort of get people to understand sort of this is the way that we're moving and this is the future. And yeah, but listen, it's super exciting to see what you're doing at Circle, and obviously we kind of firmly believe in what you're doing. We've made that very clear by kind of having you as our main partner here on the settlement side of things.
Yeah, and really, in a way, now I'm going to kind of flip this around a little bit because, Credix is really at the forefront of taking processes and business industries that have been around in the TradFi world for quite some time. I feel like, quite frankly, those processes have gotten fairly onerous over years of adding middlemen and, quite frankly, dealing with regulation. And so I'd love to hear from you about, the high level thoughts of Credix and how it is that you guys are using our digital dollars to do the job that you're doing and in the role that you guys are playing.
Yeah. I mean, listen, USDC has been extremely, extremely helpful for us, and we see a ton of value in it. I mean, obviously the Credix business, right? We're structuring these credit transactions for fintechs in emerging markets. And these fintechs in emerging markets, they have historically kind of a difficult time accessing institutional capital from around the globe. And that's what we're sort of alleviating there. And so the way that we're actually implementing USDC and using it is a means of settlement. And so we're processing cross-border transfers all the time to send this capital down to Brazil or Mexico or Colombia or Peru. And we find a ton of value in the sense that USDC can be transferred 24/7, 365. So you don't need to adhere to, banks' sort of 9 to 5 timeline that they operate by, which can really throw a wrench in things when you're trying to close a transaction and the bank isn't accepting any more wires because it's 4:00 or whatever it is. And then the instantaneous nature of it too, right? I think, we had a recent example where we were structuring a transaction, and this originator was kind of mind blown that the actual cross-border nature of it was going to happen almost instantly, because what they're used to is, okay, here's the lender. The lender is sending capital to you as an originator. You start paying interest on that capital the moment that it leaves the lender's bank account. You don't receive those funds if it's being sent through the SWIFT network for sometimes days, right? And I have a background in traditional finance as well. And I spent a couple of years at Citi, and I have seen an international wire take 7 days before. And it's, it can be ridiculously frustrating for all parties involved, even the middleman sometimes. So I think that, we find a ton of value in the way that USDC sort of operates, that 24/7, 365 nature, the instantaneous nature of it. And then also the institutional aspect, right? I've mentioned it a couple of times, but the fact that you're so transparent in terms of what is actually backing up this stable coin, and that it's always redeemable one for one, and all of that, I think provides a lot of comfort and gets these more traditional institutional investors, comfortable and willing to test this out, and kind of drive adoption there.
So let me follow up with that, if I may.
Yeah.
Because I too interact with maybe even some of the same names that you're talking to on the institutional side, and agreed that for them, sophisticated financial professionals oftentimes can speak and read English, even if that's not their native language. They're able to see and understand USDC and some of the benefits to how we've gone about creating this digital dollar. At the far end of your pipeline, though, at the end of the day, you've got users and merchants in Latin America and around the globe that are receiving and using USDC. And I'd love any insights and feedback. Are these entities just taking USDC? Do they ever ask any questions? Like, do they end up using USDC to pay off their small vendors as well? Or do they have to end up converting it back into local currency? I'd love any color on that end of the pipeline, if you can share that.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of them right now are converting it into local currency. That's kind of just the nature of the beast and kind of the way things that are operating currently down there. Now, in the future, of course, right? That's the kind of end goal, is where everything's sort of operating using this digital currency, and it's kind of the way of the future. We see a lot of forward thinking from fintechs down in emerging markets, specifically Latin America. You see a lot of different players, like Brazil, for example. We have a very close relationship with the central bank, and they're very, very open to exploring the efficiencies of blockchain technology and how that can sort of, almost upgrade their financial infrastructure. And so I think that there's very much a willingness to sort of explore, and you see different use cases and examples of that exploration actually happening. But currently they're off ramping into sort of that local currency. Now, that being said, they are certainly reaping the benefits from kind of the instant transfer across the border, because that is sort of a waiting period that they would have to undergo if it were not for that instant, transfer of capital there.
Yeah, agreed. And it's funny, as much as we all see right now the benefits of these movement of value on distributed ledgers or blockchains, there still is a limiting gating factor of the legacy banking system. And as you pointed out, when I asked the question, at the end of the day, oftentimes for some of the merchants and vendors that are on the far end of the pipeline for Credix, they've got bills to pay, whether it's their own rent in their local jurisdiction or whatever, in local currencies. Mm-hmm. I'd actually, if I can go kind of just for a question, do you see, without trying to get politicized at all, is there going to be demand for localized stablecoins in these other countries, or is there more likely to end up being a wider acceptance of a digitized dollar for use in smaller transactions in some of these developing worlds? Love any thoughts and feedback there.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I could kind of see it playing out either way, but it doesn't necessarily need to be mutually exclusive, right, to reap the benefits. But I think you see a lot of countries around the world that are already leveraging sort of dollar, right, the US dollar, and that are dollar based. Now, when you go down to Brazil, they certainly use kind of their own currency, more often than not. So I think that there's sort of room for both, if you will, but there's obviously sort of this global trust in the US dollar that I think certainly gives USDC, or sort of a version of the digital dollar, an upper hand in that. So that's kind of how I would comment on that.
Okay, I appreciate that insight. And then my next question for you is, one of the key factors about truly natively digital assets like USDC is that they're programmable. And I know that Credix makes use of this feature of all digital assets, not just USDC. But I'd love to know how some of your business processes get automated by using the programmability of USDC.
Yeah, no, I think there's a level of automation, and then also obviously on the transparency side of things is very key as well. But in terms of automation, I think what we're doing at the end of the day is we're kind of running the technological infrastructure of sort of like a credit fund, if you will, right? And so what will happen is these fintechs and emerging markets will make repayments back to the Credix platform. And then we'll go ahead and distribute those interest and principal repayments to our investors, to the lenders, if you will. And I think the programmable nature is key here, because one of our main value adds is actually automating those sort of repayment schedules, if you will, according to smart contracts. So what happens is, an originator or a fintech down in Brazil will pay sort of in their, in USDC back to the platform. And it will essentially sift through the different layers of code and say, okay, here's the senior investor. Here, this amount of principal goes automatically to them. Here, there's this junior investor. This amount of interest goes automatically to them. So it sort of kind of goes through the waterfall, if you will, and allocates capital accordingly. And this is key for our business and is a huge value add, because the way that credit funds kind of historically have run is spreadsheets and emails. Right? You have an entire back office completely dedicated to making these calculations, double checking the calculations, and then distributing the payments accordingly. And so by automating this through sort of the programmable nature of blockchain technology, and then sort of using USDC to run through that, it's extremely valuable. It provides a ton of value to us.
I'll tell a little anecdote, if I may, John. My very first job with State Street Bank, I was helping reconcile broken trades in Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico on the Bovespa, on the bolsas down there. And I think one of the things, like I mentioned, I had my aha moment sitting in this lecture about blockchain for supply chain. It was like, my God, we still, though there's reams of automation and massive technology and processing capabilities, there's still a heck of a lot of manual processing that happens at a bank, at a credit fund, to do just what you said: the payouts at the end of a quarter, dividend processing for corporate actions. It's still, there's a heck of a lot of people and a lot of manual processes happening. And the idea of smart contracts, that's effectively, in my mind, like it's an if-then statement that can be programmed in. And they use blockchains to validate all the steps prior, and that all conditions have been fulfilled, and you don't necessarily need junior clerks checking a box here and there to say yes, it's been fulfilled or not. That really was the appeal to me, that the way the global financial system is currently wired at the time, well, still is, unfortunately.
Still, yeah.
It really can be improved upon greatly if one trusts in code. And I happen to trust in code. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think, it's, the trust aspect is huge, right? It's like, you got to build up the trust. There needs to be an understanding of kind of how these automations, how these smart contracts work, how they're coded, making sure they're actually matching sort of the underlying legal aspect, right? Because that's a big thing about our business. Yes, we're using USDC as a means of settlement. Yes, we're running on this blockchain technology, but all of our transactions have your very typical traditional contractual obligations, right? And so we are matching sort of that and tokenizing those and making sure that automation is built in. So I think, building up the trust in sort of how things are running is key. And then, once people trust more and more and see kind of the real value that this is bringing, certainly they'll get on board, and hopefully spreadsheets and emails will be removed in the future of this ecosystem. Kind of, maybe touching on future, and I know we're sort of running out of time a little bit here. I wanted to throw one more question back to you, Steve, in terms of, we talked a lot about stablecoins, USDC, sort of like the mission of Circle. What does the future of stablecoins kind of look like in your opinion? And maybe more specifically USDC, but where do you see this going? There's obviously the regulation at play. There's new institutional players coming into the market. There are things kind of happening on a daily basis. What do you kind of imagining the future look like in 5, 7, 10 years?
Core principle beliefs are there's a multi-chain future. and that the ability to interact amongst chains is going to be effectively abstracted away. I know abstraction is a kind of term of the moment these days, but at a certain point, the blockchain of choice you use will be irrelevant and almost unknown to the end users. That's one. Two, we do firmly believe that regulation around the globe will continue to be implemented, will continue to be refined, implemented smarter, and that our core principles here at Circle of trust and transparency and playing by the rules will win the day at the end of the day. As far as use cases for stablecoin, we've touched on a few of them. Again, like the capital markets use cases initially were the early, and trading were the earliest like market fit for stablecoins. But now we see financing, such as Credix is doing. There is more and more use cases around trade finance, whereby a manufacturer of fancy Italian ornate chairs needs to ship them over to the U.S. And that industry traditionally relied on letters of credit. It relied on escrow attorneys confirming, and quite frankly, smart contracts and digital dollars can remove so much friction from that, friction and cost from that. I see that. Remittances, in my mind, tie in very closely with that same, rather than trade finance, it's more like individual remittances, but I think those tie tightly. And then finally, I do think, as I mentioned earlier, Circle, especially with the move to our digital infrastructure offerings, and there's other firms offering that as well, is going to make the idea of using digital dollars, not the current version of dollars that I call electronic money, like a Venmo or an ACH. I think electronic money was a great iteration and better than checks and better than SWIFT. I think natively digital dollars are an even a exponential improvement on what I think of now as electronic money as well. And so I'll reiterate, I think stablecoins, fiat-backed stablecoins, are a core principle or core tenet or pillar of what's going to be built in the coming decades in the global financial world. Circle, we plan to be there, supporting that with our stablecoins, with the way we operate, with some of the infrastructure we offer around that space, and allowing people to build with stablecoins. I think you'll see more stablecoins coming out, both by Circle as far as other currencies and fiats that are backed, and also the other providers that are out there providing digital dollars in their own formats. And Circle's USDC will have, and Eurocoin and other stables will have to compete with those contenders as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a bright future if we can just continue to move kind of towards this digital nature and really bring all of these ecosystems, specifically in the financial side of things, onto the blockchain and make everything kind of digital. It'll be much better for everyone, I think. So that's great, Steve. So I think that might be all we've got here. I want to thank everyone for joining. Obviously, today's Circle Insights webinar today, we had Steve Leahy on from Circle. We learned a little bit more about Circle, kind of the mission that Circle has. It's stablecoin USDC, and then kind of how it works within the Credix platform. I guess, Steve, maybe I'll throw it to you if there's anything else that you'd like to cover before we close out. Also, maybe it would be helpful for everyone sort of listening in if they want to learn more about USDC and kind of how you're operating, maybe how they'd be able to do that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Not many more closing comments here from my side. I think we covered a lot of topics, and I greatly appreciate Credix allowing Circle onto the podcast or the webinar. We're very happy to be partnered with Credix and helping grow your use case. I've been following Credix from early days, and I see you guys as one of the winners, so we're happy to be here. As far as any more insights around Circle or trust and transparency, our website is circle.com. I personally think if you go to the transparency tab there, we've got, again, information on our holdings. We've got executive insights there, writings from Jeremy Lair, Jeremy Fox-Geen. Our whole executive committee really talks about our core beliefs of how we operate the company, how we strive for trust, how we operate in a regulated manner. And so circle.com and go to the transparency tab will really help explain how we operate and some of the core principles that Circle operates upon.
Excellent. Well, Steve, it's great chatting with you again, as always. I hope everyone has a good rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're located. And thanks for tuning in to another Credix Insights webinar. We hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. See you around the cryptoverse.
Thanks a lot, Steve.